I hope that you are doing well, taking care of yourself. We are now in week 2, and this week your first assignment of the organizational capacity assessment is due. But this week is also going to be focusing on funding social services and the relationship between unmet needs and programs. So this week's content and learning objectives include, looking and observing and being aware of funding alternatives, how organizations can get funded. Um, your organizational needs assessment will be prompting you to look at the various sources of funding for the organization of choice, and the strengths and limitations of each funding source. Information on grant sources will be provided in the readings for this week, both foundations and governments, and then how you select appropriate funding alternatives. So the criteria that you may be thinking about. And then the content in week 2 also examines this concept of unmet need and how to assess need for the purposes of a funding proposal. So you will be working on writing a statement of need, and you will have time to refine it in your program proposal, but you'll start with doing that in your organizational capacity assessment. And if you have any questions about that, or if you're having trouble, please don't hesitate to reach out. You'll just have one discussion post since you have an assignment this week, which is the discussion post is on identifying an unmet need. Of the resources that you have to read, there are several chapters in the NARE book on effectively managing and leading human service organizations. So understanding the budget process is incredibly important. No matter how well you perform, clinical services, other administrative tasks, if there is a problem with your finances, you're going to be heading for trouble. So especially in this current context where the economic environment is uncertain, you really have to develop a very keen understanding of budget processes in order to manage your resources in an effective way, and to be able to advocate and fundraise effectively. So a budget is a plan for anticipating the income, that you are going to need and the expenses that your organization is going to have within a certain period of time, generally a fiscal year or a calendar year. Considering past financial experiences of the organization, being aware about current organizational programs, how much they cost, will help you determine the overall financial health of an organization. And it'll give you direction for how much additional resources you need to acquire and maybe where you can get them. The most important aspect is that you're avoiding a financial deficit, which would ultimately could lead to an organization closing their doors, being in debt, job loss, and all of that stuff. The budgeting process should involve multiple perspectives. We talked a little bit about this in the video from week 1, from the board of trustees or board of directors to frontline staff, people who donate, the clients, supervisors, even public officials that have a stake in what that organization is providing in that community that elected official represents. Budgeting is also an ongoing process, so putting together a budget once a year generally is not enough. You should be going back and looking at it. Oftentimes organizations will hire accountants to be responsible, or financial chiefs of staff to continually be looking at the budget and adjusting it as new information arises. There are also some readings on effective fundraising, and how to effectively raise money. So in some cases, organizations will hire someone. That'll be the first step, is hiring someone who has experience in securing grants, writing proposals, being able to fundraise large amounts of money. Maybe the organization that you are a part of currently, are working at, or previously has had a fundraiser role. Maybe you've been in that role. But after identifying who will be doing that job, that very important job, then updating your mission and vision statements to align with what the organization does and who that organization is in that community, and that does change over time, is incredibly critically important, that your information is up to date. And then assessing your organization both outside, so in the community, in the county, the city, the state. What services does that organization provide relative to other organizations, and how well do they provide them? And then also assessing the inside of the organization. So what are the needs of the organization that aren't currently being met, and how would additional funding help achieve those goals? So evaluating the programs and services within that organization is the next critical step. Making your organization visible is incredibly important. So generally having an outreach coordinator or someone who is committed to elevating the presence of the organization in the community is also important. As you read more about stakeholder management and the various roles that social workers can play, this is an important role from your perspective as someone who delivers services, or at the macro level is designing programs. Being able to talk about that in a way that attracts additional funders is incredibly important. Gathering descriptive materials of the organization. Sometimes you could write those from scratch as it's time to fundraise, or the organization may have a history of writing descriptive materials about their services, their programs, who their clients are, their success stories. And then once you have all of that and you have that narrative that you're ready to tell, then you can start to raise funds by developing a pitch, making presentations, inviting funders to come attend a board meeting or come tour your site. Now in the time of COVID, all of this is being done remotely, or if it is being done in person, obviously folks need to distance and wear masks, but things are different now. And so it's equally important to be thinking about, in our current context, how can you fundraise effectively, and stay safe at the same time. So other chapters that you will be reading for this module include, managing agency finances. We went through a little bit of that. Strategic resource development, so thinking through strategies for how to attract additional resources to your agency. Preparing effective proposals, that's chapter 15 of the NARE book, incredibly helpful as you start to gear up to write part 1 of your proposal for week 3. And then ways to seek funding. And we just went through some of those, one way, 8 steps to seek fundraising and fundraise. So that is all I have for this week. Please reach out to me if you have questions as you are participating in the week 2 discussion about identifying unmet needs in your organization as you are writing your organizational capacity assessment. As I mentioned, I hope that the sample example paper from a previous student is helpful for you to craft this first paper. Please do pay attention to the formatting of the paper, but also the quality of the writing, which is equally as important. I am here if you have questions, and I look forward to engaging with you all this week.